Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Tanja and today I've got a tutorial for you on how to sew this neckline. Some months back I showed you a blouse with a similar neckline and a lot of you seemed to like that blouse and a few of you were interested in a tutorial on how to make this. This is a great hack because it's easy to do, it looks stunning on a variety of garments and different neckline shapes, and it looks so different to the average garment people are sewing. Since this is just a tutorial on how to make this neckline, you'll need a pattern for the rest of the garment. You can pick basically any pattern, just make sure that in your opinion it would work with this detail. You can pick any blouse or shirt pattern and it doesn't even matter if you're using a woven or a knitted fabric. So let's go! We start with all the pieces cut out just as your pattern instructions say. It's the easiest to create the neckline if your garment is still laying flat around the neckline or relatively flat. Then join the shoulder seams so that your neckline lies in front of you in one big hole. Before we sew or cut out anything, we have to decide on the width our neckline detail should have. My neckline will be 4 centimeters wide, but you can take any measurement you like. Now you have to decide where exactly you want to add the detail, meaning whether you want to cut your neckline wider and add it here, or if you just want to add it above your neckline, or if you want to do a mix of both. Keep in mind that your head has still to fit through this hole. My neckline is relatively small. It has still 1 centimeter of seam allowance on it, but I think it will be too small to add my 4 centimeters here. So I will at the front and at the back take the 4 centimeters out, but since the edges of the neckline already sit relatively wide apart on my shoulders, I will just take a centimeter or so out here. So make your markings on the fabric where you want your neckline details to sit. Before you now cut anything out, we'll first check if your head fits through the neckline. So we'll take our measuring tape and just eyeball the distance we picked for our neckline detail and lay the measuring tape about around the way where your inner neckline will sit. And then we take this loop and check if our head fits through that. So if your head doesn't, you have to make the neckline bigger. For me it's way too small, so I make my changes now. So now we can go ahead and cut this out. Remember that your pattern will still have seam allowances on it. So if you cut your neckline here, you will need a centimeter or at least half of a centimeter to fold your fabric over to attach bias tape or a facing or whatever your pattern recommends. So your neckline will get a little bit bigger than this. To cut your neckline symmetrical, I recommend you to fold your fabric in half, secure it with pins so that the layers don't slip. And then just take your scissors and cut around the neckline evenly. And voila, your new really big looking neckline. The next step is to finish that neckline as your pattern suggests. So either with bias tape or a facing or whatever you think is best. press your neckline to make it lay flat and look nice from the inside and outside. Now we will create the loops that form our neckline. So our neckline will consist of 2 rows of loops. This is one row, and between that we will have a second row going a path like that, so that it looks more dense. If you want it to look more loose, you can actually just make 1 row of loops. But in this version and the other version of this blouse I used 2 rows. For this process it's helpful if you have a second measuring tape. If you just own one, take some kind of cord or wool and lay out the design with that, and just use your measuring tape to measure. So just let me check. These are the 4 centimeters. The design will be high, and the distance between the loops would be about 10 centimeters. To make sure that the loops are distributed evenly along the neckline, we first measure the complete neckline. So my neckline has a length of 102 centimeters, and as we all know, that doesn't divide evenly by 10 centimeters. So what we do now to calculate the distance our loops should have is we divide our neckline circumference, in my case 102, by the distance we measured at the beginning, in my case 10, and that makes 10.2 loops, but that isn't even. So the nearest whole number is 10, so I divide my circumference, 102 centimeters, by 10, which is 10.2 by accident as well. So I know now that to evenly space my loops, they have to have a distance of 10.2 centimeters. So start at the middle of the back now and mark it with a pin. And then measure out the distance we just calculated. So in my case 10.2 centimeters. And mark it with another pin. And now do that with the rest of your neckline. Alright, that was one round. Now do another round with the first pin just in the middle of an interval of 2 pins. And it should look something like this after round 2. Now we need to cut the straps for the loops. Once again, lay your neckline flat and take your measuring tape, this time with the 0 at the beginning of the loop, flip it once, then take a second measuring tape or a ruler to measure the distance you wanted the top and the bottom of the neckline to be, so your width, in my case 4, and then just take the length of the measuring tape, so in my case 12.5 centimeters. That's the length of one loop now. So one round for me has 10 loops. I made 2 rounds, so 20 loops in total. 20 loops times 12.5 is 250 centimeters. Make your own calculations and then cut a strap this length. Either cut that plus 2 centimeters seam allowance in one long strip, or cut it in several short strips, but then add 30 or 40 centimeters so that you don't have seams within the loops. You can cut the strips parallel to the grain line or 90 degrees to the grain line. They don't have to be cut on the bias because they won't be shaped. This strap should be 1 inch or 25 millimeters wide. If you own a bias type maker, this could come now in very handy. I'm using the yellow one, which is 12 millimeters, which is half of an inch. Now put your strap into your bias binding maker and then just iron the outcome. Once you have finished the strap and it looks like this, fold it close and iron it like this. If you don't own a bias type maker, doesn't matter, just fold the fabric with your fingers while you're pressing it in place. Now we just have to secure our straps. We do that by sewing along the open edge. And after you've pressed your straps, they should look like this. Now we have to attach the straps to the neckline. Therefore, we are taking our pins and our straps plus a tape measure and measure the length each loop should have and mark that with a pin. And then we go ahead and do that for all the straps. Now that everything is prepared, we can start to pin our straps to our neckline. So let's just begin at some point and align the end with the needle and simply pin the strap 2 millimeters under the edge of the neckline. Then take the strap, fold it over, skip 1 pin and bring it behind the next pin. Put out this pin and take that pin to pin the strap from the front just under the edge of the neckline. So again, take the strap, fold it over, skip 1 pin, go to the next pin, put away one of the pins and take the other one to attach the strap 2 millimeters beneath the edge. Now go ahead and do this with all the pins and the straps you have here. When you're beginning with the second round, attach the strip like we did in the first round. Then take the strip, again fold it like we did in the first round, pin it just beneath the edge, and then pull all your fabric through the loop from the first round. So the first loop of the second round comes from beneath a strip and then finishes above the other loop. It looks the nicest when all the seams on the straps are on the same side, so in my example on the right side. That way you can also check if you pinned all the straps the right way, because if your seam suddenly is on the left, you know you messed something up. To make it easier to sew the straps in place, take the straps at each pin and pin both layers of strap to the edge of the neckline so that it looks like this. That way it will be much easier to attach them. So that's what it should look like afterwards. Now you can take your sewing machine and top stitch once around the edge of the neckline. So that's how it should look like by now. And on the inside we only have these excess on the ends, which we now have to cut off and then finish with a zigzag stitch. So fold back everything you don't want to stitch in and then just zigzag the edge. Now it can't fray you. So the only thing left to do is creating the band which will lie on the inner part of the neckline. To determine how long this has to be, I'm taking my tape measure and insert it exactly where later the inner neckline band will lie. So then pull everything in place as good as possible and measure how much you need. So for me it's 67 centimeters. And now you have to cut another strap this length, but this time the strap has to be cut on the bias because it will later lay in a circle, so you want it to be on the bias so that you can iron it round. So I have prepared my inner neckline band just the way we did with the straps before, but before we finish the edge with a line of top stitching to close the strap, we're gonna iron it in a round shape so that it lays flat later on. So take your iron and then form a curve and iron over the strap. So that way it forms a nice round neckline. Now if you iron out, give the rest of your neckline a press as well. So try to iron the straps like they will lie later on and press the top of them so that they look more like a zigzag line than loops. So all the straps should look nice and crisp by now, and every top of the loop where you ironed in a crease should lie exactly above the point at the bottom of the neckline where you attached the two loops. Now take your sewing machine and top stitch the inner neckline band at the outer edge. And now just insert your inner neckline band into the loops. So we come from the bottom of each loop and go to the top, just like the pleats here suggest. Try to flatten your neckline as much as possible and then pin the strap together. My strap is a little bit longer because I added a few centimeters of seam allowance just in case. Now it would be helpful to try this on either on your mannequin or just pop it over your head and see if everything looks still flat if you have it on. If you need to adjust the length of the inner neckband, then do so. Now your inner neckline strap has the right length. You can cut the edges back to 5 millimeters seam allowance on each side. And then just turn the seam allowances inwards. And pin it again. And then just sew this line here and finish the edges. Now your seam will look like this, and you see the edges are still poking out. To prevent the edges from poking out, we'll take a needle and just sew them in place quickly by hand. And voila, that's already a little better. If you still feel like your closure looks too messy, you can secure it under one of the tops of a loop, so you hardly see it. Otherwise, voila, your neckline is finished. So thank you very much for sticking with me till the end. I hope this tutorial is useful for you, and I can just encourage you to try this hack because it's not very difficult. It just takes a little bit of time and it looks so much more elaborate than it actually was to make. Please give me a thumbs up if you found the video useful, and subscribe if you aren't subscribed yet. See you soon. Bye!